Hello, hello, hello. How is everybody? It is 9:30 here. I'm half an hour earlier than I normally am, but that is because I have a speaker interview later for my next summit, which is in March, which I'll be telling you all about as it gets closer. How is everybody? If you're watching, let me know. Say hello, please, and let me know. And I'm just going to check I'm just going to try and find the feed. Oh, I can't find it. Of course I can't. Bear with me. Here we go. Cool. Right. So where are we? I've lost you. Okay. Hi. So today we are talking about pre-departure cues, or dogs that get anxious maybe or are triggered by the things that you do to indicate that you are going. Hi, Janelle. Thank you. You sound great. Nice. So pre-departure cues are things that might trigger your dog. So we have lots of pre-departure cues, lots. And dogs are observing us all the time. And so they know exactly what means that they're coming with you or whether they're staying home alone by themselves. And some dogs, when I say are triggered, they get anxious when they see you do things. So common pre-departure cues would be maybe your keys. For women, it could be handbags, could be putting on makeup, could be blow drying your hair. And it could be some other less common things. So it could be shutting, maybe you've got a back door that you lock and shut before you walk out the door. Could be something as you might not notice, but your dog does, like taking your lunch out of the fridge. I've had one client that had, every time they took the lunch out of the fridge, the dog was like, oh no. And that's because that dog had had lots and lots of experience of home alone time and had associated the lunch being taken out of the fridge with being home alone and being scared. So I want to tell you a little story. So yesterday I recorded the podcast, Tales from the Doghouse, Separation Anxiety Explained, where we talk about dogs that get anxious before you even walk out the door. And obviously we touch on pre-departure cues. On the podcast, I'm going to tell you the story here as well. But on the podcast, I talk about the weekend where I mowed the lawn for the first time. I have never mowed the lawn in my entire life, never. And unfortunately, my husband does quite long hours, and the lawn out the front was getting pretty long because he didn't want to do it on the weekend. He just wants to sit down and relax on the weekend. And I don't blame him, but the lawnmower is really hard to start as well. So it's not like this is my excuse. I can't just go and turn it on and mow the lawn. Plus I hadn't ever done it before, so I didn't know how to do it. I wanted to make sure I did it right. So anyway, I convinced him that I was going to do it if he started it for me. We ended up sharing the job. So while he was doing whippersnipping, I was mowing the lawn and vice versa. Now he mows the lawn in what we call in Australia, we call them thongs. Now in America, a thong is a completely different thing, I am told. A thong is a G-string. My husband was not mowing the lawn in a G-string, he was mowing the lawn in thongs. So that is in England, they call them flip-flops. In New Zealand, they're called jandals. I don't know what they're called in Canada or South Africa, but I know, I don't even know what they're called in America. Maybe someone can tell me what they're called. What do you call thongs in America? And I don't mean G-strings. He was not mowing the lawn in a G-string. He was wearing, surely somebody knows what a thong is. Can someone tell me what a thong is called in America? Write it in the chat and let me know. Anyway, moving on. So he doesn't wear proper footwear when he mows the lawn. And I used to work with a bloke that actually cut off his toes while he was mowing the lawn because he was wearing thongs, not a G-string, thongs, flip-flops. And he actually cut off his big toe too. So he actually, in America, not American, but sandals. Yeah, kind of sandals, but with, I feel like I should go and get a pair now. Hang on. these things. Oh, look how dirty they are. But yes, these things, thongs. That's what we call them. Flip-flops in Florida, same as the UK. Yeah. Anyway, so this guy had been mowing. This guy I used to work with had been mowing the lawn in his flip-flops, and cut off his big toe and a few of his other toes, and actually had to learn to walk again. So I was like, well, I'm not going to mow the lawn in a G-string, in flip-flops. So I put on my proper walking shoes. Unfortunately, they are also the shoes that I take the dogs out in. So what happened? The dogs saw what they thought was a cue that they were coming with me and got all excited. And I'm like, actually, no, you're staying here. But that's just to demonstrate how observant dogs are. They know what we put on means they're coming with us or they're not coming with us. And so a lot of the things that we do when we are hoping to leave our dog, our pre-departure cues can be triggers to our dogs. So we want to avoid that, obviously. And to do that, we firstly need to identify what our pre-departure cues are, because everyone's got different pre-departure cues. I've had clients, so I had one lady that one of her pre-departure cues, if she was leaving the dog, was to ask the dog to go out for a wee before she left. This dog was toilet trained. It was quite happy to go out for a wee, bedtime wee. She wanted the dog to go out for a wee before bed, and it was quite happy to do that. But if that dog had noticed all the other leaving cues that she had, and then she asked that dog to go out for a wee, it refused to go out. So very, very smart. But for you guys, you really need to understand what your pre-departure cues are. Is it keys? Is it a handbag? Is it putting on makeup? Is it getting lunch out of the fridge? Is it maybe making lunch? Blow drying your hair? Is it a uniform? Could it be, I don't know, type in the chat box if you can think of any that that you might trigger your dog, or your dog is quite aware of. And it doesn't even have to be a trigger to your dog. So my dogs don't really have separation anxiety, but they still know whether they're coming with me or not. They really, really do. They know. And I always say to them, so if I'm leaving them, I'll tell them something. I'll say, oh, I'll be back, in my best auntie voice, or I'll tell them I'm going hunting if I'm going shopping. Sometimes I'll just say, be good, but that's kind of a leaving cue as well. But that's not detrimental to them, because they're not concerned. They just look at me and think, oh, and get sad face. But yeah, so if you guys want to type in the chat box if you can think of any of your leaving cues, because if they trigger your dog, then maybe we can avoid them. So for example, maybe you've picked up your keys and your dog is looking at you like, oh, and we need to know what your dog's signs are too. So firstly, we need to know what your pre-departure cues are, or your leaving cues. And then we want to know if your dog is anxious about them. So what behavior do they do that might say, oh, they are really worried about these cues? So it could be pacing. It could be vigilance, hypervigilance on you, like, oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? It could be drooling, maybe shaking. Some dogs will tremble as soon as they think mum's leaving. They'll start trembling because they're so scared. Excessive drooling, maybe pacing, even maybe a whine. Some dogs will be, oh, you are leaving me. I don't want you to leave. So I'm going to grab my toy and distract you. And they'll start dancing around with a toy in their mouth because they don't want you to leave. So there's all those sort of things that can, your dog can display certain behaviors that say, I know you're leaving. I don't really like you leaving. So if we can avoid your pre-departure cues, if it is a trigger for your dog, then let's do that. So that might be putting keys in a pocket an hour before you're about to leave, or maybe putting a handbag in a car before you leave. It could be, it just depends on your situation and your dog. If you have to lock up a back door, maybe do that an hour before you leave. If something is avoidable and it's a trigger to your dog, do we need to do it? So maybe it's a certain pair of shoes that trigger your dog. So can they go into your car or outside the front door? Same with coats. All that sort of stuff. So trying to figure out what your leaving cues are, what triggers they are, and are they avoidable? And then if they aren't avoidable, can we rate them on a scale of 1 to 10 and decide these ones are the most scary, these ones aren't so scary, but they do cause concern for my dog. So that sort of thing is really, really important. And then with my clients in particular, if something is avoidable, we take it out of the training, and then we don't necessarily ever add it back in if we don't need to. Or we take it out of the training and then we add it back in when the dog's comfortable to be home alone for at least 30 minutes. For me, I like to get to the 30-minute window, and it's got to be consistent. So remember, we talked about the 4 C's: calm, confident, consistent, and comfortable at home alone. Once they haven't seen those scary cues for so long and we add them back in, we start another training plan that's really, really low. The dog often doesn't have, the trigger doesn't have as much weight for the dog as what it might have if we tried to add them in at the beginning. So I never do training with around pre-departure cues at the beginning. And that's a very traditional way, probably a little bit old school training method for dogs. So you might be told to pick your keys up, put them down, pick them up, put them down, pick them up, put them down. For me, I don't like to start with them. I think it just complicates your training way too much. Now, somebody did ask a question in here, and I promised to answer it in the Facebook group, and I can't find the question anymore. So if you're watching and you've got a question while I'm here online, let me know so I can answer it while you're here. So while you're maybe typing something out, hopefully if you've got a question, I shall see if I can find this question here. But any questions about what I've said today? Hopefully there's no questions. Yeah, let me know if you've got any questions about today, about pre-departure cues. I have just published the podcast episode. It's also on YouTube. I'm going to chuck the link into this group so you can have a look at it. And we go a little bit more in depth than what I've told you here. This is kind of just an overview of how we tackle pre-departure cues, tackle dogs that get anxious before you even walk out the door. And don't forget, if your dog gets anxious before you even step outside the door, how do you do separation anxiety training? So what we need to do is, in fact, get rid of those pre-departure cues and add them in later. Dog's not triggered by them as much, and often either we can add them back in and the dog's fine, or the dog might be a little bit concerned, but not as much as if we had tried to start with them, which just complicates things. Let me know if you've got any questions. I honestly can't find, I feel terrible. I know somebody had a question and I can't find it. Bear with me. Poor Barbara, her dog was attacked by a Rottweiler and her husband died in a matter of months, and her dog's really struggling. Barbara, I know we've talked about this in the past. I know you're doing your best. Try to find cover for your dog when you're not available to be there with it. And if that's not the case, maybe you could look into some medication. I'd go and talk to your vet about maybe medicating her. While you're not there. If you can't find cover for her, it might be a kindness rather than having her out of her mind, scared, panicked. And Marion, I can't pronounce your surname, Ortman maybe. Our current 15-year-old Westie was always fine when her mummy dog was alive, but after her mummy dog had to be euthanized at age 15 after suffering seizures 3 years ago, she cannot stand to be left alone for any length of time. The fact that she is totally blind and deaf makes it even more difficult situation. I'm really sorry, Marion. She just gets frantic if we are not with her. Yeah, she's panicked, and we can't better upset her that way. I'm so glad that you feel that way. We do take her with us and place her in doggy stroller. That's lovely when we visit friends, and she just curls up and goes to sleep, so it doesn't cause any problems. But then it doesn't work for taking her into most stores, restaurants, as it's against policy, so it limits us. Leaving her in a crate at home alone doesn't work either, as it stresses her beyond belief. Yeah, look, for me, I think you're doing the right thing. Just not leaving her. She's 15. If you do need to do something, can you find someone to look after her? Yeah, if she was 5 months old or 15 months even, I would be actively trying to train her. But I think at 15, and also given that she's blind and deaf, I think the kindest thing to do is do what you're doing. Hello. Hi, Ness. Oh, hang on, let's put this up here. Nice to be here. Have you come across any particular breeds that are more predisposed? Oh, I have a study on that, actually. Bruce, good to see you too. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, one that really, so I do have a study, and it does put out some breed names. I think the Wheaten Terrier was one, but anecdotally, from my perspective, I think greyhounds often struggle because when you think about it, and I'm talking about racing greyhounds, when they're brought up, they are always in company. They're always in a kennel environment. They've got other dogs with them, and they've got people with them, and they never really get taught to be home alone. And I think that they might struggle. In fact, I know for sure that when they ex-racers and they go into a home environment and they're the only dog and the guardians leave, then they definitely do struggle with it because they've never learned to be home alone. So it's kind of understandable. I mean, I could say to you, Bruce, that maybe, for example, oodle types, so groodles, labradoodles, spoodles, all the oodles, the crossbred poodles, some of them seem to be predisposed to separation anxiety. However, is it because the breed is so popular? So does that skew the results? So possibly in another country where there's another popular breed, maybe you might say that breed is more prevalent. It's more prevalent in that breed, but possibly it could actually be because that they're a very popular breed and there's more people with that breed. So I could pull up the study. It would take me a minute to find it though. So, but yeah, I know Wheaten Terriers were one. I have found Dachshunds seem to have a lot of issues with home alone time, but again, they're a popular breed. So the jury's out for me. I think I would say most of my clients are oodle types. However, they're very popular in Australia. Yeah. My pleasure. Send to me whenever you get a chance. Yeah, sure. I can't even tell you how old the study is. And the thing with studies, I'm sure you already know this, Bruce, is that we have to look at how robust they are. So how many dogs were used? Was there a big sample pool? What was the study? So is it just talking to the pet guardians, the dog guardians? So it's not a scientific study. It's more an anecdotal study. So it's literally that, maybe the dog guardian gets a lot of, a form to fill out, and they are looking at it subjectively, not objectively. So really, no matter what the study is, no matter whether it's dogs or food or whatever, we need to look at how robust it is, and also how subjective as opposed to objective it is, and is it peer reviewed and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. Yes, figures lies and liars figure. Well, I don't know. I'm not saying that people lie about their dogs. I don't think that probably is the case, but are they looking at the right thing and viewing it the right way? So for example, there's something called the caregiver's placebo effect. And what that is so let's say, for example, my dog has arthritis. And so I get online, I order some sort of herbal remedy that's supposed to be wonderful, lots of reviews, give it to my dog, and I think, oh, wow, it's wonderful, it's worked. Has it worked, or is it the caregiver's placebo effect? In other words, I want it to work, so I'm seeing it work. And I know A lot of people might feel this way about separation anxiety. So their dog's got separation anxiety or anxiety, and they go and get a herbal remedy, and then they're like, oh yeah, it works really well. But is it working, or is it caregiver's placebo effect? So when somebody is filling out a study form for a scientist, they're not necessarily lying. I would say possibly they're maybe reading things into their dogs that aren't there. Here's another example. I met a lady recently. I won't go into the details of where or anything, but her dog is lacking training, has not been brought up in a very good environment for it, and it's a Malinois, and they need the right type of training. She's had some bad advice. It's been suppressed. It's been, just not good upbringing, and the dog is very has a go at her and has bitten her, and it's also overweight. All this stuff. And I said, you've got to get some weight off that dog because your training will go better, because it's not healthy for the dog. It's a young dog. It's developing. It's not really good for its skeletal system. But it'll also help your training, because your dog will listen to you more because it wants the food that you've got in your hand. And she said, oh no, I have to keep lots of weight on it because it will get angry at me if I don't, and it will bite me. Dogs don't think like that. That was her perception. So if she was filling out a form that a scientist gave her, I would be worried about her perception. So I think perception is a big thing. She also said things like the dog had a temper. Well, we know dogs don't have tempers. It's just poorly trained. Maybe they might they don't have tempers at us. So I think the dog was just poorly trained, but that's her perception. So perception is a big thing. No stats can be and often are twisted to fit a narrative. Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. But I'm talking about the people filling it out. If I'm a scientist and I've got a pool of 20 dogs and I want the owners to fill out the form to give me an idea of what's happening in the dog's home, their perception of what's happening and what's really happening might not be the same. Like that lady I just mentioned. Anyway, back to separation anxiety. Anyone got any questions? I don't think there was any others in the group, and if there were, I can't find them. I know there was, I just can't find it. So apologies if you're watching on the replay. I just don't know. Anyway, okay. Well, if no one's got any more questions, I shall. Oh, hello. Ria and Bree send kisses. Oh, they're so lovely. Give them kisses back. I am going to get off here now because there's no more questions. Give it 2 more seconds. If anyone's got a question, put your hand up quickly. Anybody? No? All right. Unless you're typing frantically. Oh, what's this? Oh, you will. Cool. Thanks, Laurel. All righty, guys. Well, if you're watching this on the replay, let me know if you've got any questions. Hopefully I covered everything. Stay tuned. Check out the, I'll put a link in the podcast as soon as I'm off here, or the YouTube link, so you can watch what we talk about for anxious dogs that are too anxious, like the minute you walk out the door, before you even walk out the door. And yeah, so check that out as well. And if you haven't already, make sure you register for the Out of Control Pet Summit coming up. I'm not organising this one. It's organised by the Dunbars, who most of you probably have heard of. They're pretty famous, but I am a guest speaker on it. So I will be talking about separation anxiety for that as well. So there's a link in this group, so make sure you register for that too. And on that note, I am going to depart. See you next week.